let's talk about bad bosses. A quick Google search will return a tsunami of results, including the movie Horrible Bosses and the horrible movie Horrible Bosses 2. As far as I know, there's not going to be a Horrible Bosses 3. Sorry to disappoint you. I hear you. I know what you're thinking. Wow, I could write that movie if it ever came up. Hopefully you've never had a bad boss. More importantly, I hope you are not a bad boss yourself. But let's get real. Bad bosses don't listen to YouTube videos like this. And because this is all about how to grow as a leader or a manager or a supervisor. Odds are you may have some work to do, but you're not a bad boss. But odds are also that you have had a bad boss or two. If that experience is in your past, you can probably smile and nod knowingly. Maybe even grin a little bit as I take a scenic tour with you through bad bossdom. So if you're under the shadow of a bad boss right now, ooh, sorry about that. You may want to put your headphones on so nobody around you can hear what I'm talking about. Just saying. So let's dive in. Reports and exit interviews about bad bosses are plentiful. If you want some great late night reading that'll curl your toes, get a hold of some of those exit interviews. Even when we filter out the perspectives from disgruntled departing employees who are themselves the problem and listen for perspectives from the great employees who tried valiantly to work with the bad boss, the impact of these leaders or managers or supervisors is massive. So in our research, we've learned a few things. We've been invited into the conference rooms and the back rooms and the dive bars to commiserate with people under the dark cloud of their bad bosses. So here's a few things that we have learned. First, the consistent upstream reason why people are fed up at work is bad bosses. Second, if they're frustrated about their schedule, it's the bad boss that makes the schedule intolerable. Third, if they are frustrated about their inability to get the mountain of assigned work finished, it's the bad boss. And how that bad boss deals with that problem, that tips the scale. Next, we've learned that when they have to work with difficult and underperforming team members, it's the bad boss who's mishandling the situation that eventually results in a toxic environment. We've also learned that high-performing team members who are the first to express frustration with bad bosses, they're also the first to leave when the situation isn't resolved. They have the most opportunity, the most experience, the highest commitment to the mission, and they see the bad boss as a threat to all of that. They dip out because they correctly assume that if they stick around too long, the reputation of the bad boss will eventually become their reputation. I have a friend who worked with a bad boss and stuck around for so long that when she decided to finally leave that organization, no other similar organization in that industry wanted to hire her, because the reputation of the bad boss stuck to her like a bad perfume. She couldn't get another job. She had to change industries completely. So we've also learned that the great boss fallacy really exists. It's like this. It's kind of like, I think I'm a great boss. It's a little bit like the great driver fallacy. You know, if you ask a whole bunch of people, are you a good driver? Almost everyone will say, well, I am an above average driver. All the other people are below average drivers. If everyone is above average, somebody is not good at math. So it's like that great boss fallacy or the great driver fallacy that bosses can think, I'm great, it's everyone else outside of me that's not so great. Here's a seventh thing we've learned. It's called the halo effect. You may have heard of this before. And that's the idea that since he or she is really good at one thing, or has some sort of quality about them that is very appealing, that means they're going to be good at everything. It's like every tall person is a good basketball player. Or the fallacy that every good basketball player is also good at managing money. Well, that's a false thought. That's called the halo effect. So here's the eighth idea, the eighth thing that we've learned, that giving bad bosses constructive feedback doesn't work because they think this: if that person were not such a pain, I wouldn't be a bad boss. Or they think, if all y'all knew what I know, you wouldn't be giving me that feedback. So it just bounces off of them. Okay, so you're working with a bad boss. Let's unpack this dynamic and see what you can do about it. So, first, check yourself before you wreck yourself. The philosopher who was also the performer Ice Cube back in 1992, he's the guy who popularized, I guess, that phrase. I think his lyrics were a little bit more catchy than that, like chickadee check yourself before you wreck yourself. He was talking about a microphone check, but still, I'm not Ice Cube and I'm not going to try to mimic him, but you're welcome to go ahead and use that on yourself. You got to check yourself because you might be contributing to that bad boss dynamic. Anyway, it's really easy to blame your frustration on somebody else. It's easy to find something to blame them for, especially if they are kind of bad around the edges. It's easy to ascribe pure, wonderful, virtuous attributes to yourself while ascribing bad intent to other people. Even if we've had exactly the same behavior. That, by the way, is called attributional error. If I do something, it's for good intent. If you do the very same thing and it annoys me, it's because you have bad intent. But seriously, look at yourself first. Be ruthlessly honest with yourself. Are you proud of how you respond to and talk about and work with your bad boss? Is your behavior an excuse for his or her bad behavior? I'm not saying you're to blame, not saying that at all, but often with bad bosses, their power comes from our response to them. Change your response and their power fades. Perhaps just with you, but it'll fade nonetheless. All right, here's the second big idea. Is he or is she really a bad boss? Is it, more precisely, just a really bad situation in which you all find yourselves? That is, if the situation changes, the behavior changes. Usually, if the situation changes and the bad boss's behavior changes, the person you've labeled a bad boss is probably not a bad boss. They'll probably awkwardly apologize. And that's not an excuse, but knowing that will change your strategy. It'll take a little pressure out of the situation. Here's the third big idea. Do you have a clear, written, measurable set of expectations? Are the expectations two-sided? That is, expectations you have with the boss and of the boss, and that she has for you. Expectations need to be specific. They need to be behavioral. They need to be results-oriented, and they need to be written. Here's the fourth big idea. Are you one of those, it's just you and me here now, so you can lean in and you can be a little self-critical, but are you one of those hypersensitive, fragile people who takes offense easily? Nah, of course not. That's not you. To be blunt, again, if you were one of those hypersensitive people, those brittle, fragile people, or the fragilistas who militantly take up your offense for you so you don't have to, you probably wouldn't have tuned into this, right? All right, here we go, fifth big idea. Since I'm kind of getting personal here, let me ride that wave with you just a little bit longer. It's just you and I here. Are you bad at your job? Or are you so bad at your job that you make people crazy, including Biff, the person you've labeled a bad boss? Is it a little easier for you to ignore the 2x4 of poor performance in your own eye while complaining about the speck of sawdust of bad boss behavior in his eye? Okay, just saying. All right, time to move on from all that awkwardness. Now that you've looked at yourself and you've avoided wrecking yourself, let's zoom in on the truly bad boss. That's why you clicked on this video anyway. So here are a few observations. The structure of some organizations and teams foster this bad bossery. Organizations can be either a ROWE, R-O-W-E, that is a result-oriented work environment, or they can be a POE, process-oriented work environment, or a TOWE, T-O-W-E, task-oriented work environment, or a LOWE, a leader-oriented work environment, or a FOWE, which is F-O-W-E, a feeling-oriented work environment. So the environments, certain environments actually foster bad boss behavior. The FOWE, the feeling-oriented work environment, and the LOWE, the leader-oriented work environment, often result in this epidemic of bad bossery. There's something about how the organization is oriented that fosters people who are bad bosses growing up within that organization or being hired into them. Here's a second idea. Their behavior, it can be one or a combination of these behaviors, is most evident when they're under pressure. It's usually arising from an insatiable appetite for control or approval or personal security. Those appetites give rise to some of these behaviors. They could be a micromanager. That's a person who needs to step in and make sure everything is done exactly the way she wants. They could be a one-size-fits-all and you adapt to me kind of boss. They could have a fixed mindset. That means I'm right, end of story, nothing changes, and they're very uncurious. They could have a life where they have literally no self-awareness, especially no self-awareness of the impact that they have on other people. They could be a blamer. That's somebody who is focused on who did this rather than what was done and how it was done. They could have the approach of a make me look good style of being a bad boss. Your job is to make me look good so that I look good to my boss. Maybe they could be a pathological optimist. That's somebody who measures effort and no results. And the shots at the basket, metaphorically, are really all they care about, not the score. That's a bad boss. Maybe they're a fear monger. That's someone who peddles in fear and they think it actually works because fear at first does work. People move, they do things, but it doesn't last very long. And in fact, they get so disengaged after a little while that they have to defend themselves from that fear. And the only way for the fear monger as a bad boss to work longer is that they have to create more and more and more fear or get rid of people and bring in people they can scare. Maybe they are one of these, what I like to think of as, oh, I've paid my dues style of bad boss. Or maybe they are a please like me kind of bad boss. I think of all those 11 bad bosses that I just mentioned, the behaviors that go with them, that's the most difficult to deal with. Please like me. So all of these behaviors arise from some sort of inner emptiness, an insatiable appetite for control or for approval or for personal security. But let's not get too Dr. Phil here on that, right? I'm just saying this to underscore that the behaviors that the bad boss has come from a really deep well. But of course, you know all that. That's not why you're here. What you're here is to figure out how to deal with a bad boss, right? Okay, so let's get into that. Here's what we've learned. You got to, of course, check yourself, make sure that you're not the one really contributing to this, and be realistic about that. So once you've done that, first of all, set clear written expectations. Make sure they're measurable, make sure they're result-oriented, get specific, use the expectation is this, so that this, so you can connect expectations with results. And then update those written expectations at the beginning of anything new and make sure that that boss sees those. You'll often, with a bad boss, have to create your own written expectations and share them with him or her and have them sign off on them, because part of what they do is they do not get clear on written expectations. So right out of the gate, make sure you have written expectations. That will often clear up a lot of the problems. If it doesn't, it gives you a tool to use when the problems arise. So set boundaries is number 2. This is a type of expectations, but the boundaries you and I need to set are boundaries around schedule and accessibility and responsiveness, even emotional boundaries. Don't carry the boss's emotions. Here's the third thing we've learned. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Even ask him how they want to be communicated with. Don't hide from the bad boss. You're going to want to, because most interactions with the bad boss are unpleasant, but don't do it. It makes everything worse. Here's the fourth idea. Use the OIC, the observe, interpret, or impact and communicate consequences model. We have that in another one of our videos here. You can find that and see it. Use that OIC model to communicate about behavior. Here's what your behavior was that I observed. Here's what the impact was, and here are what the consequences of your behavior if this continues. Here's the fifth idea. Do a good job. Meet your deadlines. Don't let your performance be an excuse that the bad boss uses to act out and to behave like a bad boss. The sixth idea is stop gossiping about the bad boss. Just stop it. Doesn't help, makes it worse. Seventh idea, don't give her emotional power over you. We have a video here about dealing with difficult people without becoming one. You may want to dip into that one if you're interested here. But you're probably not playing the same game with a bad boss that they are playing. You're probably playing what I like to call the truth game, which is a game about what's right and correct and what's the facts, and you're constantly learning and getting closer and closer to what works and what's right. And they're probably playing a power game. And a power game has a very different set of rules, and you can't win a power game with a truth game. So you're probably not even playing the same game at the same time. Here's the eighth ideal. Deal with conflict directly. If it's a conflict about expectations and boundaries, resolve it directly with him or with her. If it's conflict about values, what really matters to you and what really matters to that boss, if it's a values conflict on a deep level, you're going to have to get out. You got to make a plan to get out and go work somewhere else. Document every conversation. Use email to document. Be clinical in your documentation. Don't add a lot of emotion to it. Just here are the facts. Make your daily progress toward your goal of working somewhere else. Caution here. Here's the ninth idea about going above his or her head in the rank structure that you might have or the hierarchic structure that you might have. It never works, especially if he's been there for a long time. The culture in which you're now working has tacitly rewarded that bad boss's behavior. It won't change for you. I know, it's kind of hard to hear, but this bad bossery didn't occur in a vacuum. Others knew about it and tolerated it. They might have even applauded it. If not the behavior directly, they certainly applauded the outcomes that that behavior created. So going above his or her head won't work. Finally, remember, you're in control. You're in control of three things: your perspective, who you rely on, and what your behavior right here and right now is. A couple of quick thoughts before we finish about getting out. Number one, if you need to get out because there's such a conflict that it can't be resolved, number one, do not trash talk your bad boss on your way out to another job. That is a big problem. And people hear you talking about the bad boss in another job, and their respect for you goes down even though they smile and nod knowingly. Here's the second idea. As you're moving out, you're going somewhere else to a new job opportunity, interview the new boss before you accept the job, including getting references about what it's like to work with him or her. I am shocked to this day how rarely people do this. They think it's a one-way decision when it is not. It is a two-way decision. So on your way, you're making a plan, you're going to get out. Here's the third idea. When you leave, do so with grace. Bitterness never settles anything, and it'll follow you for years. Okay, so there you go. Bad boss, check yourself. Set expectations, do really good work, increase your interactions with him or her, and if all that fails, get out. I know, this is not easy stuff. If it were easy, you would probably have already done it. Even if it was mildly difficult, you would probably already have done it. You've got important work to do. You just may not be able to do it where you are right now with that boss. I hope that's helpful. Here's to you.